2022. Thank you for joining us for the Burlington City Council meeting. The time is 6:13. There was a little bit of a problem to the agenda. Although there was an amendment made to an agenda item, it is not showing up on board docs. So what I'm hoping that someone could do is to move the agenda with the following amendment, that we would be adding to item 7.04, an amendment posted at 2:44 p.m. per CAO Shad from Councilor Jang. If somebody could move that.
So moved.
Thank you. If there's a second.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Travers. Thank you very much. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have an agenda. The next item on our agenda is number 2, a communication with an expected executive session on union collective bargaining negotiations. Before we go into executive session, Attorney St. James, is there anything that you would want to or be able to give us in open session on this item?
We're working. There we go. Just that we're generally in the early stages still. I think we want to give an update to council, get direction from council so we can keep moving forward towards, hopefully swift resolution of the agreements.
Okay. Are there any questions from councilors based on that information? And if not, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session. The 2 motions are listed on board docs. If somebody could make that motion, the first motion, please. Who has their computer up? Councilor Hanson? Thank you.
I move that the council find that the premature general public knowledge of information concerning the city's position and legal advice concerning such a position in regard to labor relations agreements with employees would clearly place the city at a substantial disadvantage when entering such negotiations.
Thanks, Councilor Hanson. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Travers. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Councilor Jang. Seeing then, if you could make that second motion based on the finding.
Based on that finding, I move that the council go into executive session to receive confidential attorney-client communications per 1 VSA 313A1F in a labor relation agreement with employees matter. 1 VSA 313A1B.
Thank you, Councilor Hanson. Seconded by seconded by Councilor Travers. All those any discussion on the second motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you. We see your thumbs up. Thank you. So we are in executive session for the benefit of the public who may be watching. It is expected that this executive session will be no longer than 1 hour, perhaps a little bit shorter, and we are hoping to reconvene in Contois at 7 p.m. We will be downstairs, so there isn't anyone in Contois, but if there is, well, there is actually. Can stay here, and we will hope to be back in about 45 minutes or so. is now 7:10. Did want to also, for city councilors, you've received an email about the fact that the departure of our city attorney has left us with an opportunity and a challenge, and one that we believe that the city attorney's office feels they have solved. Just wanted to welcome Attorney Stephen Ellis, who will be sitting next to in between the mayor and the CAO. Due to the departure, as I said, of the city attorney, it was the decision of the city attorney's office to hire Attorney Ellis to serve as our parliamentarian for the next few months. And for those who haven't taken a look, in case you haven't, Attorney Ellis has an extensive background in municipal law, working with select boards and other government entities. So thank you so much, Attorney Ellis, for being here, and welcome. We will reconvene the meeting with item number 3, which is a presentation regarding the Main Street project. I believe we have a team from DPW, not only in person with Director Chapin Spencer, but also a number of people that are with us, joining us online. And we're going to try, if we can, to keep the presentation aspect of this to about 20 minutes, and then we probably will have to take a break with public forum and then come back to this. So good evening, and if you can introduce the people that are joining us, that would be great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, President Paul, and thank you to the Council for the opportunity to present the updated conceptual plans for the Main Street Great Streets project. With me remotely are 2 DPW staff members. We have Senior Engineer Laura Wheelock and Public Works Engineer Olivia Doris, who are capably managing this ambitious program. And there's a large consulting team which we'll introduce soon. The key message here, really, in my mind, is that this is a time-limited, generational opportunity to rehabilitate and re-envision Burlington's aging Main Street, the primary gateway into the city between I-89, 2 colleges, 2 public schools, downtown, and our soon-to-be reactivated train station. The Great Streets Initiative builds on over 10 years of community planning, much of which we have discussed here before. And as long as we keep the momentum going, we will be able to meet the deadlines to have the downtown TIF district fund the $30 million comprehensive renewal of Main Street without impacting local property taxes. So tonight is another public engagement opportunity. After 35 other public meetings and listening sessions, we've had an online survey, lawn signs, and many one-on-one meetings. Tonight is a next opportunity. I want to have our team show the presentation here and recognize the many city departments who have been involved in this effort to date. This really has been a remarkable opportunity where I think most, if not all, departments have been engaged in this project one way or another. And here you'll see many of them called out from the Racial Equity, Inclusion, Belonging, BCA, Parks, Church Street Marketplace, CEDO, Public Works. We've also had City Attorney and CT Office and many others. So we'll get to introducing the consultant here in a second. There's no decision that's being requested tonight. This is a presentation and a Q&A. We do plan to return to you all on the 23rd of May to seek your support for the general concept and the proposed changes to the line and grade of the road so that we can direct our consultant to finish up the conceptual design and move to preliminary and final plans. As you recall, this is on an ambitious timeline with construction that is projected to begin fall of 2023 or spring of 2024. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to VHB's lead team member, Evan Dietrich, who will introduce the consultant team and lead us through a short presentation. Evan.
Okay, thanks, Chapin. Good evening, everyone. I'm Evan Dietrich with VHB. I'm the overall project manager for the consultant team. We do have a bit of a formal presentation here. We'll try to keep it moving right along. This presentation, along with additional information, is available in your city council packets tonight. So you have this presentation plus more information that you can view between now and the 23rd as well. So 3 main consultants, VHB, Agency Landscape and Planning, and then the Grayscale Collaborative. And with me tonight from Agency is Susanna Ross and Steve Woods, and they're both going to speak in just a minute. But just to refresh your memory about the project, this is the Main Street project that extends from Battery Street up to South Union Street. So it's a total of 6 blocks. You can see the map there. It's 6 blocks right through the heart of the downtown. We're going to talk about the timeline tonight. This is the schedule we have for the project, and you can see we are here now at City Council tonight. This team got started in October of last year with some preliminaries such as the field survey and geotechnical investigations, and since that time, we've had 2 public meetings and 2 business owner meetings, as well as a bunch of outreach sessions to a number of different focus groups. So that has happened really between February and the present time. Looking forward, we're going to be back in front of the City Council later this month for your concurrence on the concepts that we've developed. And then hopefully we'll be able to move right forward into the preliminary engineering, which will happen through the rest of this year and into early next year. And then next spring and summer, we'll be preparing the final plans and the contract documents, and then get the project out to bid so that construction can begin in late 2023. And that'll probably last through at least the first part of 2025. And that may get extended out too, depending on what other initiatives the city has going on at the time for things like the ravine sewer possibly. So that's kind of a quick summary of the timeline. And we're going to talk about what we've been doing for the outreach that I mentioned over the last couple of months. And I'm going to turn it over to Susanna for that.
Thank you, Evan. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. As mentioned, we have done a lot of engagement, including neighborhood meetings and sessions with underrepresented groups, BIPOC, seniors, persons with disabilities, a lot of online survey responses and website visits. So we really feel like we're getting the word out, and we're going to continue to do that. In your packet, you're going to see, and as well as on the website, greatstreetsbtv.com, you'll see for each group that we've met with. In this case, we're looking at the neighborhood group from February. We've got a nice sort of graphical summary of what we're hearing. And it's given us the ability to sort of look and see some sort of common themes that are emerging from different groups. In this case, residents, for example, we are seeing are talking about Main Street as a vital cultural and civic resource for both newcomers and longtime Burlingtonians. It's a gateway that should represent the diverse and rich culture, history, and identity of all residents. At the bottom, we'll jump down. There's some specific concerns that businesses are expressing about the need to support future needs and maintenance, about coordinating this project with other city priorities. And then in the middle, we've got a good chunk of overlap where both businesses and residents want to see places for arts and programming for all ages. They want to see accessibility and safety of pedestrians. This is really paramount. And they want to see a clear parking and wayfinding strategy to support the success of businesses. So again, there's a lot more to dig into there, and we welcome you to do that in your packet or on the website. But next, we will take a look at the sort of toolkit of what we are looking at here for those 6 blocks of Main Street. What you will be making a decision on come May 23rd is going to be the alteration of the roadway curb alignment in part, and that is really to streamline the roadway as much as possible, the gray zone you see here, to allow for 2 lanes of traffic and 2 lanes of parallel parking, and then really give back as much as possible for amenities like bikeway, clear walkway of a really consistent width, amenities like planting and seating and art. And you'll see that on the length of Main Street, we're aiming for that section that you just saw. There are going to be some places that you're probably familiar with at City Hall, at the Griffin, shown here on the right, where we don't have that full width and there are some encumbrances. And so that section you saw is sort of the goal for the design, but we'll have to deal with individual variations block to block as they come along. And here is just a little bit sort of by the numbers of what exists today. So a roadway pavement width of 50 to 70 feet that will get to a consistent 40 feet. We're going to have a reduction in parking spaces and ideas for how to mitigate that. We have no bike lanes today. We're going to have separated lanes for each direction, a more consistent sidewalk width, plenty of space for stormwater treatment and green space. And really great opportunities that we don't see today for the kind of plazas and public art that we hear the public clamoring for this gateway. And with that, I will hand it to Steve Woods, who's going to talk about 2 ways of looking at those 6 blocks, assuming kind of a similar section or sort of space allocation for each one, but with 2 different sort of themes.
Thanks, Susanna. Again, a lot of words you'll hear a lot today repeating. We understand that Main Street passing through 3 districts and touching 4 wards from Union Street to Battery looks to be both a gateway and destination to your city. It wants to be representation of a rich culture of its people, its businesses, and its community. This first option looks at the artful gateways aspect that looks to represent a dignified, continuous Main Street for all blocks, with emphasis at the intersections and a celebration of all of those artful gateways and aspects in the center. As I mentioned, the Artful Gateway strategy looks to find locations for art to occur within the 6 blocks. And so it looks to the endpoints beginning at Union Street all the way down to Battery Street and looking at each intersection as a location for art to occur, again, culminating between Church Street and St. Paul Street. There'll be thought bubbles that you'll see happening on each of the slides. And in your packet, these are direct quotes that we've heard through the different engagement strategies and interactions that we've had. For example, cool sculptures that are interactive and inviting for kids and families is a quote we heard from the youth group. Each of the packets, you'll also have a plan that shows a simple rendered plan in the space. This is the one for Artful Gateways. A little squint test will show that there is an organized arrangement of shade tree planting where possible, with sort of emphasis in gathering at the intersections. There's enlargements of each one to begin to show the locations of where bikeways would occur, where the green spaces may be showing in different spaces, and then also indications of cross sections, which we'll see in the next slide. In this cross section, which is happening down near the western end of the street between Champlain Street and Battery Street, begins to show those thought bubbles again from the focus groups that we've reached and heard. It shows the information that Susanna was talking about before, with the cross section indicating the location of bikeways, separated from the pedestrian movement that's happening along the sidewalks, options for art and signage, and also activation of streetscape areas where there may be the ability to have a spill out from adjacent businesses. The middle section, the heart of it, if you will, looks at a cross section between City Hall Park and the Flynn. This area of street, we're looking to express a flush curb situation similar to Church Street, but then dedicating a lot of the space towards pedestrian activity in a safe manner. We also see the opportunity to express art in many ways, potentially above the street, acting as a gateway within this area. Also within the packet, you'll see enlarged plans that begin to express different zones that would occur on each street. Adjacency to spill out spaces next to businesses, furnishing zones where planting and seating would occur, and again, flexible parking spaces which could be occupied during seasonal times or special times to be activated, again, advancing and encouraging more pedestrian activity along the streets. The second option, called Lake City Mountain, looks to identify the street in 3 zones that are expressive of the landscape changes and the characters of the lake, the city and mountain, from Lake Champlain through the cityscape up to the Green Mountains. This option focuses a lot on the green space and a softscape and planting that would occur within the streetscape, looking to identify a more natural and mountain type scape towards the west, a more civic open green space in the center, and then moving towards a more natural, but maybe a water's edge or planting type landscape to the west. This plan, also included in the packet, begins to show the slight differences based in the functional structure of the streetscape, where the bikeways begin to take a more meandering approach, allowing for those larger pockets of green space to occur, still minding safety and separation between the pedestrian, bike, and the road. Additional cross-section in this area, this one is shown closer to Union Street to the east, an area where the word encumbrances is shown and brought up again. In this section, you'll notice to the southern portion of Main Street, there is the indication of a multi-use path due to the encumbrances that are happening currently within that cross-section, allowing for the safe travel of both pedestrians and bicycles in this uphill side of the road. The plan that shows the different zones is also included in this area, showing the little nuances of extended furnishing zone space due to the movement of the bikeway, the opportunities for more continuous connections of green space, be it through shaded tree canopy adjacent to sidewalks or to stormwater management systems, which should be located in proper locations along the street, understanding slope and visibility. We still see the opportunity for special amenity zones happening mostly at corners where we have expanded open space, hardscape space with the narrowing of bump outs and the easier passage of pedestrians in a shorter time frame and shorter distance from one side of the street to the other, improving safety of crossings at intersections. I'll hand it back to Evan to talk about the next steps.
Okay, so we recently had our second neighborhood meeting, as well as our second business meeting. City Council tonight, City Council on the 23rd. And then once we get through the refinement of the concepts, which we're doing this spring, then we'll be into the design phase, and we're going to continue to reach out to the public and different city entities, the different, all the participants that Chapin mentioned earlier. We're going to continue to coordinate with all those groups, including BED, who is really acting like a sub on this for the design of the lighting. And we're going to continue that throughout the design process. So we are asking for feedback from anyone who's on our mailing list or anyone we've talked to by May 14th, and continue to refine these concepts. And we'll be back in front of this group on the 23rd. And from there, we're going to jump into the design and keep moving right along. And let's see, 7:28. So I think we're about out of time, and I think we're about out of slides.
Thank you very much.
Do you have anything else for I mean, we can always come back.
I think at this point, team, we are wrapped up and prepared for Q&A. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll have to put that on hold for just a couple of minutes. It's now 7:30, and time for the public forum. Seems as though the beautiful weather outside is at least one reason why we have a fairly quiet gathering inside Conchois. There is one speaker who has signed up to speak who is inside Conchois, and then there are a couple of speakers who have requested to speak during the public forum who are online. All of them are Burlington residents, so we'll just simply go with who is in Conchois and then go to the online speakers. The speaker who requested 2 minutes, I don't see. This was given to you. does not appear to be here. That's Todd LaCroix. So if you're in the building and hear this, you're certainly welcome to come back and speak. That is the only person who is asked to speak who's in Conchoice. There are a couple of people that have asked to speak who are online, and they are the first speaker, and they'll be given 2 minutes, so the timer will start shortly. The first person, and I'm assuming is former Councilor Sharon Busher. Sharon, I know you had spoken during the Board of Finance meeting. I'm assuming that you would like to speak during the City Council meeting as well. So I've enabled your microphone, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you very much, President Paul. Yes, it's a different topic. I want to speak to item 7.04. And I wanted to first start by saying that when Councilor Bergman was, prior to his election, he was my staff person. And I worked with then Gene Bergman and BED to require new buildings to have renewable energy sources that would heat and cool. I was no longer part of the council, but I was very happy to see that that was put in place. And I do support this next step, which is the development of decarbonization policies. I very much agree with the phase-in approach of major renovations, city buildings, and large commercial buildings. I do have a couple of comments regarding the timeline. I am concerned about the timeline for BED to report back to the council by July 18th. I'm sure they'll speak for themselves, but that seems like a very tight timeline for such a big task. And the other thing that I wanted to say, that it's one thing to create policies, it's another to figure out how to fund this conversion, which has always been the issue. And I think that it would be very helpful if indeed there were some examples, like what it would cost to do City Hall or what it would cost to do dealer.com. So we had an idea of what we're talking about. The last thing I wanted to say, because I'm running out of time, is that in the resolution, it talks about major renovations, but it doesn't specify whether those are commercial or residential. And I think it's important for us to know that. Having said that, I'm going to end. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, former Councilor Busher. There's two other people who submitted forms online. If you are online and wish to speak during public forum, you can complete the form on the city website. It's or you can just simply go to burlingtonvt.gov/public forum. There is a form that will come up. You complete the form, and the answers that you give will come into a spreadsheet that I'll see, so that we can call on you. There are two other speakers. One of them is Eileen Christensen. Eileen, I'm sorry, I can't find you online. If you want to raise your hand, use the raise hand function, that would be fine. The other person is Keith Pillsbury. And Keith, I have located you and have enabled your microphone, I believe. Yes.
Okay. Am I ready to start?
Yes, you are. Go ahead, Keith.
Thank you, Councilor Paul. I'm Keith Pillsbury. I've lived on University Terrace for 48 years. I served as a ward clerk for Ward 8 since its inception. The ad hoc committee said that Ward 8 doesn't work. Here's some things you should know. There are not enough people able to volunteer the Ward 8 polls, even when I publicize our need throughout the city and university campus. Oftentimes, volunteers do not show up even though they're expected. And our volunteers are usually new every election. Elected inspectors of elections oftentimes move out of the ward during their term. Many volunteers are needed to help with the high volume of same-day registration. Getting 30 signatures of registered voters to put on the ballot, to get your name put on the ballot, is a difficult task that can take weeks of knocking on hundreds of doors of unregistered voters. Do you have that problem? University campus living units are off limits to non-student residents or candidates. According to UVM, 4,250 residents of Ward 8 live on campus. Are a majority of your voters inaccessible to you when you are campaigning? Distributing literature on campus is not allowed in living units. I have run for office and lost several times in Ward 1. I believe they were fair elections. In 2020, I experienced that Ward 8 did not have a functioning democracy. I got my signatures after knocking on hundreds of unregistered voters' doors. My opponent was given extra time past the deadline to get his signatures. I knocked on every door off campus, distributed several different flyers, and was asked consistently, did I have an opponent? Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the democracy in Ward 8 is broken. That we're not able to have access to all the voters, and that Ward 8 should be replaced with a ward that has a balanced community. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Keith. Again, there was one other speaker who had signed up online. That is Eileen Christensen, and I was not able to locate you. We'll go back to the in-person because there is another person who's also submitted a form. Todd, I had called your name, but you're welcome to come now and speak if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, it's really empty. Didn't expect it to go so fast.
Have a seat.
I think you should be aware that democracy is slipping away. Just this last week, after a decade of talking about police brutality that I have survived and others have survived, and you failed to bring real reform, the police, when called in the middle of the night to me being threatened, you know what they did? They showed up and they charged me without even investigating with filing a fake police report. Yes, that's called fascism. Are you aware that fascism is something that Officer Henry himself has said he is happy to be, to me personally? And I reported this to Bernie Sanders' office, and that the people that I have to apply to for justice in this situation are the very people who have very vocally to my face said, I'm not a human to them. Don't you think there's something wrong with that? I call in the middle of the night because I'm getting threatened and I'm being prosecuted for needing help. Let me remind you, for 10 years, even 20, my journalism and my activism has been warning you that your rights are slipping away. You just lost your voting rights. You just lost your abortion rights. Looks like I was right. But you people still don't seem concerned. I'm here to remind you tonight, if you're okay with them treating me this way, remember that you are all next. Because I and people like me were on the front lines of protecting our rights, including yours. And if you don't care about me, then you don't even care about yourself or your children, and that's honestly true. So what are we going to do about this? I'm being prosecuted
Thank you,
for
Todd.
needing defense.
Thank you
Are
so much.
Are you kidding me? You're okay? I'm
Thank
not
you.
okay.
Our next speaker that's inside Conchoice is Christopher Aaron Felker.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm here tonight to speak on agenda item 7.04. I reluctantly and with some reservations do support the transition of city buildings and new builds in this town. I echo Ms. Busher's concerns regarding major renovations, whether that is for commercial buildings or private residences. I also worry about the combined cost and how that will affect and impact Burlingtonians and the cost of living in town. I appreciate Councilor Dang's amendment, and I advise this council to proceed cautiously so not to contribute to the rising cost of living in Burlington. I appreciate that we want to transition our buildings to more green energy, but we can't do so on the backs of working class Burlingtonians who can barely make ends meet today. We know that the cost of living and the market rate for housing in Burlington is out of reach for many people, and we can barely keep it together. On the backs of last year's property tax reassessment, which has affected and impacted many, many Burlingtonians, which I also appreciate the property tax adjustment that you put out earlier today, so thank you. We have to try and mitigate some of the damage that's caused by some of our actions, and I encourage you to just proceed cautiously and be mindful of the fact that many Burlingtonians aren't as privileged as us. Some of us have to work 2-3 jobs just to be able to afford to live in this city. So please be mindful. Cost of living is continuing to go up. Let's not contribute to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are, since I had let people know how to sign up, there are actually 2 more people that have signed up for a public forum that are online. One Burlington and one non-Burlington resident. The Burlington resident is Lynn Wood, and I believe I have found Lynn, and hope this is Lynn. If it is, welcome, and I've enabled your microphone.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So my concerns, and I'll try to keep this short, is one of the strategies that BED is recommending is to install heat pumps in our Burlington homes. And I have some concerns with that because I do have one heat pump in my home. And when the temperatures get below 10 degrees, which is a very common thing here in Vermont, and if it's windy, it's actually a little higher than 10 degrees, more like 15. The heat pump is not effective at that temperature, and it requires you to have supplemental heat. So I'm going to say apprehensive about the success of heat pumps. And I also work at a job where we do install heat pumps across many of our buildings. And even with the most efficient heat pumps we use, which are designed for minus 20 degrees, still we've had problems with them only maintaining a 55-degree space. So that would be my first concern. My second concern would be if suddenly all of Burlington starts putting their systems on the electric grid, is BED ready for that? I do completely appreciate being energy conscious. I just don't know that we're quite ready for it in the time frame that we're looking to achieve these things. 8 years really does not give folks a lot of time to invest in the grid to be ready for this, especially if the Burlingtonians are expected to make all of these improvements in their house. What will that do as far as the stability of our electric system? That's really all I had to say.
Great, thank you so much. The last speaker that we have is Luce Hillman, and I have found you, Luce, and enabled your microphone, and welcome.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Luce Hillman. I'm Executive Director of Facilities Management at the University of Vermont. And my only comment on item 7.04 is that UVM be part of the conversation since we are BED's largest customer, I believe, in the city. And we are looking to make our campus more energy efficient, but we also have some very clear limitations. For instance, our solar is currently maxed out at 500 kW, which is what the state allows us to do. So I'm just asking that we be part of the conversation as this moves forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do not see anyone else who has signed up, and there's no one else who has signed up in Contois. So it's 7:45. We will close the public forum and go back to where we left off, which was the Main Street project. And Director Spencer, you had said that the presentation portion of the program is you're good.
We'd love to hear from the council with any questions or concerns you have so that we can answer those prior to the May 23rd council meeting.
Great. Are there councilors that have questions or comments? Councilor House.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for everybody who put this presentation together. So I do have a concern with regards to parking and kind of how that might make it a little bit more difficult for people with mobility issues to access Main Street. I know you had some ways to sort of mitigate this. I do think it might be a different discussion if we had a reliable system of public transportation in Burlington, but I'm concerned that sort of the heavy leaning on technology, it's sort of like through parking management app, real-time updates of other parking availability, might not be accessible to certain populations, such as people who are elderly or those with physical disabilities that impact fine motor control. And so I guess, yeah, I just wanted to kind of voice that concern and see, if there are any other ways that you all could foresee mitigating that change.
Great, thank you, Councilor House. I'll start out and then turn over to the team. Definitely hear your concern, and we had in the larger presentation, which was in the council packet, a full page on strategies. One of the strategies we are looking at is on side streets. Can we maximize spaces on the intersecting streets to provide good proximal access? We are proposing still 90 spaces in this alternative. If the will of the council and the public are to limit the kind of activation spaces at intersections, we may be able to accommodate a few additional other spaces. So that said, we have a whole range of strategies that we seek to employ, and we have a year and a half before construction gets underway. Team, anything to add?
Yep, I think I would just add, both with this project as well as others that the DPW is doing, we really do look at the neurodiverse population that's going to be using this area of town, and would seek to review how the regulations exist throughout this corridor, which spaces might be designated as accessible, which ones might promote a little higher turnover to be responsible to the businesses as well as the services that people are accessing. The last point I would bring up is that one of the choices to make the middle section of Main Street curbless is to provide better accessibility across the street between the parking, between the pedestrian spaces, as well as the businesses.
Thank you.
Are you all set?
Yep.
Councilor House? Yes? Okay, great. Councilor Jang is next, followed by Councilor Hightower.
Thank you, President. Excuse me. Thank you, President Paul. I think my first, it's a comment. And I just wanted to thank basically the administration, DPW and their team, because for the first time about the project, they visited the REIB committee and they have, received extensive amount of feedback and also next steps, and hope that they follow up on those feedbacks as well in terms of engagement with the community. I just have to say it was well done, and thank you for doing it. My question is more for the designers, the landscape designers, and was just wondering, other than the arts elements of this project, what are elements of this project that some blocks can have while other blocks will not have? And I'm saying from the perspective of what is South Winooski and 3rd Street Marketplace would have that Battery Park and South Champlain would not have in terms of the design, and taking the arts outside of the equation.
I guess I'll take a stab at that. I think that we have not fully decided on any type of give or take or less or more between different locations. In the engagement process that I thank you for recognizing that we've done so far, it's all about trying to find opportunities for best fit, given the context of the space, users of the space, and opportunities that the space may offer. If there are sort of intrinsic qualities to the space now that we begin to learn and continue to learn from Burlingtonians that can be expressed more greatly beyond the arts, be it through additional open space for gathering or the flexibility of open space to be used during seasonal times because of proximate use. I think that would be great. But other than that, we continue to look beyond this project and beyond this work to see what those spaces could offer better in based off the location.
Thank you. And it seems on the 23rd, that's when the city council will make the decision, right? And I just was wondering what could change in between that's already not in the plan. Like, what do you think? Okay.
I'll start with that one. Online, at least, we're getting a little bit of an odd echo with the sound, just as an FYI. And then maybe Evan can also follow up with their process. But really on the 23rd, what the design team is looking for is the fundamental change of the width of the road and the curb line. It's one of the things that you guys are charged with setting. And so it's moving the curb line from that 50 to 70 foot mark down to around a 40-foot mark for this corridor. And then Evan can speak to kind of how the design might evolve after that.
Yeah, right now we're trying to get set on what we want for the travel lane configurations, bulb outs or even roundabouts possibly at the intersections, and what's going to happen behind the curb lines in general terms. But we do have weeks and months ahead of us to really start to refine what it is we're going to have in any particular location. And this is a city project, this is not a consultant project. We're here to help you make those decisions about what you want to see at all the different blocks. Some examples may be, we've heard there were previously stormwater concerns at the Winooski Avenue intersection, right? That's a known flooding location. So should we be considering doing things like more stormwater treatment where we know there's a problem like that? At City Hall, it's already a gathering place for people. Should we make the City Hall block more of a plaza to extend that area where people can congregate and share their ideas and artwork and things like that? And then at the lower end of the street towards Battery, it seems to be more of a walking lane with a lot of trees today, right? Should we keep that kind of theme down at that lower end? All of these things we'll be deciding with input from the city as we go along in the coming months.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all of you. And last question, President Paul, and this is specific to the responses from the businesses about the project online, their engagement. It seemed they talked about, how do you call it? They talked about maintenance, right? And Chapin, this is a question for you about, have you made like a table or dollar figure based on the elements that will be implemented for this project, the corridor? What would be the maintenance figures for each one of them? If, for example, we want to have a roundabout Winooski Avenue, right? What will it take to maintain it versus just having bike lanes and keeping going? Have you made that? And if not, are you considering making one? So we know what maintenance could look like in the future as well.
Thank you, Councilor Chang. Go ahead.
Yes, thanks. I think the city is already starting to get a handle on what some future maintenance may look like in terms of when you look at St. Paul Street. We have some stormwater basins out there today that were built a couple of years ago, and we have pervious pavers, which the city is now in charge of maintaining. So we are starting to assess information that's come in from the other limited grade streets project, and we're going to be taking that and having a careful look at those elements that we already know and looking at other future maintenance concerns with the project so that the city does have a more informed handle on all of these things we're talking about adding. I don't have that answer today, but it is one of the things that we'll continue to look at and assess carefully as we go along.
Thank you. No further question, President.
Thank you, Councillor Jang. Councillor Hightower to be followed by Councillor Barlow.
Yeah, my first is not to get too into the weeds, but is a question on just one of the things noted that there'd be permeable parallel parking strips. I don't know if you can just talk a little bit to what that design feature is and what that means.
Great. I'll turn that over to the design team to talk about the permeable pavement and pavers.
Yeah, with this project, we do hope to continue what the city did get going on St. Paul Street, which is to have some areas at least of permeable pavers. So the water runs off the sidewalk or runs off the pavers themselves and infiltrates into the ground where those pavers are. And we are thinking about taking the parking spaces and making those permeable. So unlike what was done on St. Paul Street, is there an opportunity here to increase the amount of permeable pavement that's out there so that we can do even better job at infiltrating stormwater? It's one of the ideas that we're thinking about for enhancing the stormwater infiltration, among others, but it's something that we're considering. So it would be basically permeable pavers where we have parking lanes.
Thank you. And then this is more of a comment than a question, but also around the public participation, as other councilors have done. I think that it is really hard to get public participation early on in a project because it's hard to get the feedback. So I don't think it's ideal that it's not been as broad and diverse maybe as we want to this point, but I think that the way to mitigate that is just to continue to kind of make progress as you do, but then as you get to the end stages, being really open to getting changes and feedback that are more drastic maybe than you would want to make later on in the game, because that's when people who haven't heard about it are maybe hearing about it and giving you that input. And so I guess I would just encourage the design team to be flexible on making changes later on as you do maybe get that more broad and more diverse input, and not being so fixed to one concept because we decided on it early, which I realize is the worst thing you could say to a design team, but there we go.
Great, thank you, Councillor Hightower. Councillor Barlow to be followed by Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, President Paul. I know I've asked this question before, maybe in Tuke or maybe here, but just to revisit it, for constituents that I've heard from are concerned about the loss of parking. Could you remind us how many parking spaces are being lost and what measures are being taken to mitigate that parking loss? Thanks.
Great. Who wants to
Sure,
handle that? Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, I can start there. So with the slide, the information that's in your packet, there's 157 spaces out there currently. Right now, the concept that's in front of you is showing 90 to remain on the street. So a loss of 67 spaces. It's something that we recognize, to transform Main Street. We're rebalancing the way that the street is laid out and the different modes of transportation that it's going to serve. But we know that people outside of the immediate downtown and outside of where alternative transportation serves do still need a way to get to the city. And so this consulting team is working on helping with an inventory and a parking study throughout this corridor that should help support the project in wayfinding people to where available parking is within a 5 to 10 minute walk of the different parts of the corridor. It's just one of many strategies. There's a slide inside of your larger packet that talks about all the other kind of nuanced things that are floating around as part of the mitigation of the change in the parking. Susanna or Steve or Evan, do you want to add anything?
Well, I think from my perspective, for good urban design, you think about things like Church Street. It's the most successful business street in the entire city, and there's no parking on it. it's very successful business street because it's a sense of place and people want to be there. And people don't mind walking all 4 or 5 blocks up and down that street all night long to do their shopping, even though there's no parking on that street. So to me, Main Street has the same potential. We're going to still be offering a lot of parking, plenty of parking, but it's making Main Street more of a great place to be that will assure the continued success of Main Street to businesses and to the community alike.
Is that all,
Yes, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Councilor Carpenter?
Thank you. Some of my comments are similar to Councilor House and to Councilor Barlow. I too am very concerned about the parking. I was just down there this morning and I frequent Lower Main Street, several businesses. Because of the loss of the parking spots by rerouting the bike lanes, I could not find a spot. It took me many blocks to get a spot down there. And that's only, I don't know how many spots you lost there for the bike lines, 30 or something. So I just really think we should exercise caution in terms of accessibility, getting to those businesses. And if we want the businesses to grow, we need to be accommodating, somewhat different than Church Street where we have 2 large parking structures. So we don't have that down at that end of town. And I don't know that we're going to get one that end of town. So whatever you mitigate would be helpful. I want to sort of specifically, next week you're going to ask us about the road width. Does that mean if we agree it's sort of a done deal that you're going to take away all the diagonal parking? I mean, by making that one decision, what have we decided?
Right. Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Yes, the concept around changing line and grade of road, which is the council's authority, is that turning the parking from diagonal parking to parallel parking is what unlocks the additional space for stormwater, for the bike lanes, for the outdoor activation, for seating, etc. So we would be seeking council direction on that basic design element. To Councilor Hightower's question about design and ongoing kind of listening, within the framework of that curb to curb, accessible spaces need to be here, or public outdoor seating needs to be here versus private seating. Those types of design evolutions can certainly happen. But fundamentally, the key decision we're looking for on May 23rd is, should it generally be a 40-foot curb to curb, which does inform the parking to be parallel, not diagonal. If there's additional information that you need about that or direction, happy to get that and then try to respond to that prior to the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Councilor Bergman?
No, there we go. Like that. I heard a comment regarding the possibility of roundabouts. Are they in the potential mix?
Yes, and Evan can discuss that.
We've been charged with looking at how the intersection should operate along this corridor. They likely will either be signalized as they are today, or potentially some of them may be converted to roundabouts. And that decision is going to be based on a lot of different components, things that you can well imagine, safety, property impacts, how well they operate, how much they may affect other adjacent intersections, and how bikes work to circulate around them, and those sorts of things. So one of the first things we'll be doing as we come out of the concept phase is to really take a deeper dive and to further evaluate the intersections and how they operate, and make a recommendation to the city then, whether or not any of these should be converted to roundabouts or all stop or signalized or whatever the case may be. But DPW has asked the consultant team to look at this closely and provide a fair evaluation of what we think should be done there and make a recommendation.
My experience in Montpelier, in Manchester, and one other community, which I'm forgetting, around roundabouts, is that they can work very well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Councilor Freeman.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak towards the parking aspect quickly, or parking spaces. I'm glad that the design has a lot of emphasis on on walking and biking infrastructure. I think that, and folks who are working on this design more closely or work in sort of city design more closely can weigh in on my personal opinion, but I think that if we continue to not, only create infrastructure for cars, then in my mind, that doesn't alleviate the demand for parking, because then everyone is traveling by car. And so I think also likewise to the aspect of mobility and accessibility, if you have people who are able to walk or bike, but they are primarily using cars because there is not good walking and biking infrastructure, then that puts a higher sort of congestion on the roads when there are people who do rely on cars and sort of, for their mobility reasons, if they're using a wheelchair, et cetera. I do think there are I know some people have told me who use wheelchairs that the brick feature on Church Street is incredibly uncomfortable, and potholes are incredibly uncomfortable. And I think those are interesting things about sort of our infrastructure that can be looked at. I think that the point about the accessibility of the sort of the app features or whatever is something to think about. And I certainly advocate for sort of inclusive design, but I don't think that, from my perspective, building out comprehensive walk bike infrastructure and reducing the amount of parking spaces is not inherently exclusive, is not inherently anti-inclusive, I guess, or anti-accessible. I think that there's actually a lot of reason that it puts that it means that someone who needs to be in a car or in a transport van or whatever it is can be, and then people who can walk and bike will, and that actually makes congestion better and actually gives more spaces and accessible parking spaces for people who really who will need them. So I'm not as concerned, but I will, certainly weigh in as the project continues. And thank you for the work that's been done on this.
Thanks, Councilor Freeman. This is obviously not going to be our last shot at having this conversation. There's no one else left in the queue, and since if there aren't, I'll thank you, Director Spencer and the entire DPW team and all of the consultants that you have online. And my understanding certainly is that if counselors in the next 2 weeks have questions, that you and your team are available and would welcome those questions or comments, concerns, anything that comes to mind.
You said it better than I could.
Okay, great.
Yep. Can I add one thing and one plug is
Sure.
just the reminder that we're taking comments from the public and others through the 14th. And so if you guys, as counselors, maybe wanted to echo some of the messaging that we've put out there so everybody is aware of the project, it would be appreciated.
Great, thank you very much. So with that, I would just welcome a motion to accept the attached communications to the agenda item, and we will place them on file. Yes. Thank you, Councilor Freeman, seconded by Councilor Hanson. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Any opposed? Great. It will be placed on file. We will look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, President Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is, just left me. I believe the next item on our agenda is is item number 5, the climate emergency reports. I'm sorry, for for whatever reason, it sort of left me, but I believe that's the next item. Is there any counselor or would the administration have a climate emergency report to offer? Okay, seeing none, we can close that item and go on to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, I'd welcome a motion to move our consent agenda and take the actions indicated.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman, and seconded by Councilor Hanson. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We have approved our consent agenda, which moves us on to the deliberative agenda. I think I may actually get it now. Let's see. Okay, so the first item on our deliberative agenda is a public hearing on the community block grant and home proposed allocations for 2022 and 2019 action plans for the housing and community development. I see Director Pine here from CEDO. Before the public forum, did you want to give a brief overview? That would be great. We would welcome you.
Thank you very much. I want, for the record, it's Brian Pine, the Director of the city's Community and Economic Development Office. And tonight I am here to talk about the item which is regarding the use of community development block grant funds and the home investment partnership funds, as well as a slight change to our citizen participation plan for the allocation, or I should say the recommendation for how to allocate community development block grant funds. I'll try and stay away from the acronym CDBG, because when I use it, people, I think their eyes glaze over much quicker. So the purpose of the hearing, which is required by, actually let me just mention that my colleagues who know way more about this than I do are Christine Curtis and Todd Rawlings. So if there's detailed questions that I can't answer at the level of my knowledge, I will be looking to them. So I think they're both on as panelists. And their great work should not go unrecognized, because this is a significant increase in federal dollars over the last year or two that CEDO has managed. And it's in response to both the pandemic and just really growing needs. Just as summary, the Community Development Block Grant Program has been around for just over 50 years, and it is a program intended to reduce poverty with a focus on housing, economic development, and some social services that are broadly described as public service in the jargon of community development block grants. Essentially, the City Council tonight is being asked to approve the annual action plan, which is HUD speak for how you're going to spend the money that you're granted. And so this money comes to the city as a formula, not as a competitive application. We don't necessarily have to apply for the money. However, we have to show that we've complied with all of the various requirements to be able to receive the funds, and the city became an entitlement community 40 years ago, right about now. So this is a program that began, for Burlington's sake, at the local level, right around 1982. I just want to make sure that it's clear that next year, the amount that you all will be looking at is about half of what you're looking at tonight for dollar amounts. So in the spirit of sort of full disclosure and managing expectations, this amount of funding is unusual. And essentially what we are proposing is the allocation of anticipated revenue for what the federal government calls program year 22, we all call fiscal year 23. So it's a fiscal year that begins July 1, 22 and goes through June 30th of 23. The amount in funding for that is $706,200. that is Community Development Block Grant Entitlement Funds. There's also $415,000 in new home funds, and home funds are to support housing development and housing preservation and rehabilitation. All the information, of course, is contained in the packet, but for the benefit of the public, I want to at least mention that there's also in this is a small amount of money that's called program income. That's $30,000. That just means money that has been paid back to the city for loans perhaps that were made in the past, and those loans came due. And in addition, we have about $640,000 of what we refer to as carryover funds from prior entitlement years, and there's a little bit of urgency to get those funds spent, otherwise we start to risk losing them, and we don't obviously want to do that. So I will also point out that we have this pot of money that HUD calls CARES Act funds or coronavirus relief funds. We just refer to it as our extra COVID money, and that is elaborated in the materials that you all have tonight. What we were able to do, which is unusual, is allocate more funds to what are called public service activities because that COVID money didn't come with a public service limit. Normally, if you get $1 million, only $150,000 of that can be used for public service. But in this case, HUD said, use it for what you need to. As long as it's eligible, we're not going to say public service or development. When we say development, we refer to housing or economic development. And public service is, things like the food shelf and resource and programs that you see in the table that you were provided. So I wanted to highlight those points and to obviously answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Director Pine. We'll go to the council after, but let's do the public hearing. So with that, I'll open the public hearing. If there's anyone with us in person or online who wishes to speak during the public hearing, if you're online, please use the raise hand function and we'll enable your microphone. In person, you can similarly raise your hand and we'll recognize you. I'm just going to look to see if there's anyone online who has a raised hand. Do not see anyone. Don't see anyone here in person. Going once, going twice. With that, we will close the public hearing. Item 7.02 is a resolution to authorize the city to submit the 2022 Burlington One-Year Action Plan and amended 2019 Burlington One-Year Action Plan. Councilor Hightower.
Yes, I'd like to waive the reading and adopt the resolution.
Thank you. A motion has been made to waive the reading and adopt the resolution. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Councilor Travers. Does that mean that you do not want the floor back?
I just want to say thank you to the staff from CEDO for continuing to work on this and amending it and thinking about all the needs of the city and their work on this, and would ask folks to direct any questions to Director Pine.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Hightower. Are there councilors who wish to speak to this motion?
Councilor Jang.
So my understanding is there's Councilor Jang and Councilor Freeman. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this? Okay. Councilor Freeman, please go ahead. We've tried to allocate about 10 minutes for this, and if you can just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Pine, I was looking at the, is this correct, on the website, the CEDO 2022 Draft Annual Action Plan? This is like an up-to-date break. Is this like are these formerly what we've done, or is this projected what we're hoping to? I'm sorry, I'm so confused.
Sure. It is actually quite confusing. I had to go over a few times with my staff today. So there's a pot of money which is the CARES Act funds are the money that we've already received essentially, and we need to basically expend those dollars. We also have some old previous year CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funds, that we get spent. And then we have what is projected to arrive or come available to us in July, and we're putting it all together into this action plan. So it's really a combination of all. And that's why when you add it up, this Community Development Block Grant funds comes to $1,376,000.
Wow.
So
Yeah, I was wondering, I guess I have two questions, which is one, how, I'm just curious, like how, like when I see like the, you know, it's like, for example, like, well, this is from, I think this is 2019, but like, you know, pathways, steps, I'm just curious how some of those, is that all determined by the process that the NPAs go through, or not the NPAs, the advisory board that comes out of the NPA sort of elected board? Or is that a process that just CEDO undertakes to sort of?
No, the public process is, as you described it, is the Community Development Block Grant Advisory Committee.
Okay.
And they review all the applications and make scoring and then recommendations, and they debate it over the course of a few meetings, and that comes to the mayor, comes to CEDO and the mayor as a recommendation.
Okay.
And this is brought forward without changes to that. So that is essentially what
Okay.
that, you know.
And my understanding is that we're still keeping with that process, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And those meetings are public and?
Those are, yes.
And so folks can attend and sort of?
I should note, though, that
Okay.
there's the change in the citizen participation plan is rather kind of nuanced, but basically, if there are insufficient demands, applications for funds, there's never a lack of demand for public service funds, which think of as like social services. Those funds are always exceed, the amount requested far exceeds what's available. But there's times when the economic development and housing development fund requests don't actually meet what we have available. And so as the year goes, we run into a timing problem where if we don't allocate it during the year, we're going to get kind of stuck with the timeliness issue with HUD. So rather than go through the process of soliciting both soliciting the proposals and bringing it back through the review process, the amended plan that you have in front of you does call for those decisions to be on a case by case, but it happens rarely, but it did happen this past year where we needed to allocate the funding and we didn't have the time to wait for that process.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Well, I mean, it looks good, you know, grants are great. Free money's great, so this is great. I've always, you know, I've participated in the MPA, I've, you know, served on council. I think that the CDPG process is something else I've always sort of been interested in, but, you know, have not always had capacity for. It's a pretty cool thing, and thank you for all the work that you and the department have put together, and I'm excited to, just see, for it to continue. I think, I love that it's the advisory board with the neighborhood planning assemblies. It's a pretty cool process, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Councilor Freeman. Councilor Jang.
Thank you, President Paul. Couple of questions, and the first one is basically about the usage of these funds, these grant funds, and maybe Todd and also Director Pine can talk about whether or not there are other municipalities or the county in the state of Vermont are receiving the same funds, as a first question.
Sure. The city of Burlington is what's called an entitlement community, so we get our funds directly from the federal government. The only other entity in Vermont that receives funds directly is the state of Vermont, and their allocation is something like 7 or 8 million a year, so they get considerably more, and those funds are to be used in communities other than Burlington. So Burlington gets its piece, and then the rest of the state has access to that other pot of money.
Okay, thank you. And now, can you speak to basically why more of Burlington funds are supporting local organizations that's serving people throughout the county or beyond? And also as a first question, and the second one is for the mayor to maybe speak about, you know, on page 4, it seemed this money, the CDBG did address some quality early child care issues in the city of Burlington, and was wondering, are we still using the pilot fund, or we using part of this part of this fund also to support the early childhood initiative?
Sure, I'll take a stab at the first part of that question. The way that the federal government requires municipalities to report on the use of these funds is to show specifically who are the Burlington residents benefiting? Who are you serving? And so these are actual Burlington residents who are low. They meet the definition of low and moderate income. And so we need to report very specifically on the outcomes for those residents. So these dollars, even though they go to organizations serving maybe a regional population, these dollars actually serve Burlington residents.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Jang. Is there anyone else who has any, or actually, I'm sorry, you had asked a question of the mayor. I apologize.
Thank you, President Paul and Councilor Jang. I'm not sure, may ask you to clarify part of your question, but as I understood it, you're asking, is this an opportunity with the CDG funds to expand the Burlington Early Learning Initiative beyond what we're already doing? And we potentially, and there actually have been years where there have been where we have encouraged the advisory committee to consider investments in high-quality childcare or organizations as part of the process. And there have been, over the years, significant expenditures of CDBG dollars for those programs. I think, Brian, if you see it differently, help me out here. But where we stand currently with the Burlington Early Learning Initiative is we are getting those funds out and deployed as quickly as we can. In many ways, we've continued within the program, within the funds that we have set aside. We have been able to make we had an announcement of another one just last week. Of course, you were there. We've made these very substantial capacity grant awards, and we've been funding the First Steps scholarship program. And I think in no year have we fully expended the $500,000 a year that we generally have been reserving for this. We cut that back during the pandemic for 1 year, but we have, the $250,000 that we've been investing here. I think as we look to expand that program, and we are seeking to expand it, at a certain point, we will run up against the limits of the kind of reserve funding we have for it, in which case I think CDBG will be a place to potentially look for supplemental funding. I think we're feeling pretty good about where we currently stand, though. Is that the way you see it?
Yeah, and I would just note that falls under this very limited portion of the funds called public service. So that's a very small portion of our dollars. So on an annual basis, it's 15% of roughly 700,000. So it's really quite a pretty nominal amount. It's a little over 100,000. So it's we got to be really strategic about how those dollars are used, and we try to make sure they're leveraging others. But childcare is absolutely a good and eligible and appropriate use.
Thank you, and maybe also staff development in childcare. I think the mayoral initiative about early childhood has been great addition, and I think the results are being felt now by service providers here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councilor Jang. Were there any other councilors with comments or questions? Seeing no other questions from councilors, we'll go to a vote. The motion in front of us is to authorize the city to submit the 2022 Burlington One-Year Action Plan and the amended 2019 Burlington One-Year Action Plan. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? Thank you. Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Brian, for your good work on this important plan.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is item 7.03, which is a resolution, an amendment to Appendix B of our rules and regulations of the Burlington City Council regarding the addition of the Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee to Rule 4A standing committees. Councilor Jang.
Thank you, President Paul. And yes, I want to make the motion for the resolution to amend Appendix B Rule of Regulation of the Burlington City Council additions of Racial Equity Inclusion of Belonging Committee, Rule 4A, Standing Committee by me. Right, and want the second after a second. On the floor back after a second.
Okay, great, thank you. So a motion has been made. We need a second. Seconded by Councillor Carpenter. Councillor Jang, the floor is all yours.
Wonderful. And as you know, this is very straightforward. I feel like the city, we just forget to update, you know, the rules, the Appendix B rule to include the Burlington Racial Equity and Belonging Committee. And this resolution is basically just tasking this city attorney's office to make that change. And thank you. Hope that we all support it and move forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Jang. Are there any councillors who wish to speak to this motion? Seeing none, we will go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion to amend Appendix B as per Councillor Jang's motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Councillor Jang, thanks so much for taking this on and taking this to completion. I know it's been something that we is important, and glad that we got it done. We're going to move on to, we have two more items on our deliberative agenda. The first is item 7.04, which is a resolution regarding decarbonizing all buildings in Burlington by 2030, sponsored by Councilors Hanson, Bergman, and Travers. Councilor Hanson.
Thank you. I will waive the reading and move to adopt the resolution with the inclusion of the amendments that are posted from Councilor Jang.
Okay, a motion has been made to approve the resolution along with the amendments made by Councilor Jang. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Councilor Travers. Did you want the floor back? Yes. Go ahead, Councilor Hanson. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you. As many people are already aware, definitely everyone in this room and many in the community, the governor recently signed into law the charter change that voters approved in March of 2021, which gives the city unique authority among municipalities, the authority to regulate thermal energy systems, not only in new construction, but also existing buildings. So this now gives us a huge opportunity to really, I think, lead the country in this area. And buildings are the second leading source of emissions. So this is a huge opportunity to lead on the climate crisis. It's also an opportunity to have healthier and safer homes and businesses for Burlingtonians, save people money, and keep a lot more money in our local economy. So I'm really excited to get to work quickly now that we have this authority and start developing policies that will allow us to really accelerate that transition of our buildings off of fossil fuels. So thank you to our wonderful municipally owned utility, Burlington Electric Department, for being willing to take the lead on this work and help us develop policies that are going to move us forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilor Hanson. Are there councilors who wish to speak to this motion? If there are, and you could raise your hand so we know how many there are, that would be great. Great, so there's Councilor Barlow, and then we'll go to the mayor. Councilor Barlow, go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm supportive of the net zero roadmap, 2030 roadmap. And I also realize that decarbonizing buildings represents one of the most significant challenges in getting us there. And I'm supportive of this resolution, but I am also cautious about any policy we make, because I don't want us making policy that makes Burlington less desirable or less affordable to live in or do business than surrounding communities. And I've heard even today on Facebook, in the New North End Facebook group, and through email, that there are constituents who are concerned that any policy development would include residential. And we also heard during public comment concerns about this as well. And I did see General Manager Springer here, and I was wondering if it would be okay to sort of address those concerns to make sure that we understand what the implications to residential would be with any kind of policy development.
Sure, Director Springer. I know you have Chris Burns with you.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. Darren Springer, General Manager, Chris Burns, Director of Energy Services.
You may need to hit the button on that, or is it already on?
Yeah, it's on. Sorry.
There you go.
Okay. So appreciate Councilor Barlow's concern. Our understanding of what the resolution would accomplish is to direct us, working with the Department of Permitting and Inspections, to come back to the council with an initial report on July 18th, but probably quite a bit more work following that, focusing primarily on new construction, major renovations, city buildings, large commercial buildings. So specifically not focusing this effort on existing residential buildings. Those are buildings that we're providing significant incentives for right now, for heat pumps, for heat pump water heaters, for a number of different technologies. We're making some headway there. I think there's more we can do over time. But some of the solutions that we might look at in the space for new construction or even for large existing commercial buildings would likely have to be different in terms of what we're going to do to help residential move in the direction that we want in terms of net zero. And I really think of it as, in terms of larger commercial facilities, you may have a facility where somebody is managing a capital budget, is making decisions year after year in terms of what equipment they're going to replace and on what schedule. And if we can have a policy that makes sure that as folks are replacing equipment, for example, that they're doing so with renewable heating systems, that'll help us with our net zero 2030 initiatives and ensure that we don't invest in infrastructure now that's 20 or 25-year lifespan and is fossil fuel infrastructure without renewable fuel. So that's one of the things that's on my mind primarily as part of this work.
But so one of the comments I saw from one constituent was they were worried that if they had to replace a hot water heater that was a gas-fired hot water heater, for instance, in the next 7 years or after by 2030, they would have to do so with something other than gas, I guess, that they might want to continue to use. That wouldn't be considered a major renovation, would it? I mean...
No, I think, and Chris could speak to this as well, I think when we're talking about major renovations, we're talking about a building, and it could be an existing building, but it's being significantly undertaking work. It's not just a permit for a water heater. There's a lot of additional construction work happening there.
No, that's accurate. It's think about an existing building where you're going to take it down to the studs. You're going to replace the windows. You're going to replace the HVAC. You are basically going to start almost anew. Those are the incremental opportunities while you're doing that major work.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Barlow. We'll go to the mayor and then to Councilor Carpenter. Mayor Weinberger.
Thank you, President Paul. I want to speak just to this cost issue a little bit further and then some broader point. One thing that I think is important to keep in mind in this debate is that the non-fossil fuel options are not always more expensive, and that statement becomes truer over time as well. Some of these solutions, such as heat pumps or other electric innovations that may not have been cost competitive 5 years ago, very different story today. The efficacy of the technology also improves considerably over time. Speaking to one of the, I think, fair, important comments we heard in the public forum, but this is an area of great technological evolution and change. So I don't think anyone should think that just because we are putting rules in place that we would potentially put regulations that could include financial regulations in place to push people away from fossil fuels towards these electric, renewable options isn't necessarily a cost increase on the builder. And we found this when talking, even getting ready for the ordinances that we've already put in place that required that as a primary heating source in new construction, their thermal regulation. that when we were talking to builders, many of them said much of that primary heating source is really not a problem in many new construction situations today. It is going to complete getting entirely rid of fossil fuels where there becomes problems, and I think we're cognizant of that, and I think what we'll come forward with is going to be proposals that recognize that reality. So I guess the major point I just don't want to be lost here, just because we're pushing people towards electrification, in many situations, an increasing number of situations, that is not increasing the cost. Then to just the broader point, I'm excited this resolution is coming forward tonight. The administration worked with Councilor Hansen and the other co-sponsors to make sure that this came forward quickly. The administration was very engaged in Montpelier this year to ensure that this charter change, which there was some opposition to in Montpelier, and which it was not initially clear in particular how the governor would respond to this. We worked hard to get to this approval, and we are now very eager to work with the council and work with the public to use this new authority to continue to make urgent progress with respect to the climate emergency. The climate emergency demands urgent action from all of us. Anyone who attended the town meetings that we've had in the last couple months, I think could see in the simulators that we were using and in the conversations that we've had that the urgency of taking action before 2030 is real. Improvements that we make now, savings reductions in carbon emissions that we can make now, the benefits of them compound and accrue over time. And so I'm very excited that we are coming forward with the council to commit to near-term further action. And it's really my hope and goal that we get further rules, further ordinance in front of the voters for approval at the earliest possible time so that we can use this new authority to make meaningful additional progress in the fight against the climate emergency. Thank you, President Paul.
Thank you, Mayor Weinberger. We'll go to Councilor Carpenter and then to Councilor Zhang, and followed by Councilor Bergman.
Repeat what some of my colleagues would say. I just want to emphasize that, at least in our end of town, alive and well is the concept. You're going to come in my house, and 7 years from now, you're going to rip out my gas furnace, and I'm going to have to buy a new one. So we really need to get the education. I really appreciate Councilor Zhang's amendments on public education. We would think in this day and age, we might not need as much, but I think making the nexus, particularly the climate crisis, still hasn't been done with a lot of voters. So I just encourage us to spend time on that, because I think we need it whether we think we do or not.
I appreciate. Councilor Carpenter was with me for testimony in the legislature a number of times on the charter change, and this issue came up there as well as previously, and so we'll keep repeating that this is work that's focused on new construction here, on major renovation, city buildings, large existing commercial buildings. I think there are solutions for folks who are residential customers, homeowners, we're certainly supporting incentives to help them make the switch. And there may be other options that we can look at, financing and other approaches to support that. So we'll keep repeating that, and we appreciate the opportunity to engage.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. We'll go to Councilor Jang and then Councilor Bergman, and followed by Councilor Hanson. Go ahead, Councilor Jang.
Thank you, President Paul. Thank you, Darren and team, for being here. I think, yes, definitely, if this goes very well, go to the voters and they support it, and we implement the policy, I think that's a win. But I think the win we need to strive for is how we have done it without too much controversy. And I feel like the education is only what is missing. And it seems that's what the mayor is talking about, that, heat pumps are, and other technologies will ultimately be cheaper, in the next 10 years. So there are miseducation out there. And wanted to ask you about basically data collection. In the city of Burlington, right? How many homes, residential homes, are we talking about that do not actually have heat pumps, that are not using electricity?
Thank you, Councilor Jang. Make sure this is working. In terms of, in the city of Burlington, with our net zero energy roadmap, we're able to update each year how many heat pumps are in homes. And right now, in terms of the residential sector, we have about a little more than 1,200 homes that have a heat pump system in Burlington. So we're still at the beginning of this transition. We certainly have more than we did a few years ago. We're not going quite as quick as the roadmap pace would have us. But I hear from folks, I have heat pumps at my home in the New North End. I hear from neighbors in the New North End who have heat pumps in their homes. And, right now with a heat pump, it's very much a hybrid solution. You're going to be reducing a significant amount of fossil fuel use. You're not necessarily going to be heating the entire home with the heat pump, but you're able to reduce, take a certain zone off of natural gas and use the heat pump instead. I think there are exciting technologies that are coming very soon to market, or are already here but are going to get cheaper. Things like an air-to-water heat pump, which actually connects to your boiler and can actually make sure that 80–90% of your heating and cooling is being done with the heat pump. That technology is not yet widely commercialized in Burlington for houses, but is going to be more affordable, I think, in the coming years. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity as well as these technologies roll out.
Thank you. And I was just wondering if I can charge you this, and respectfully, to maybe look more into data collection, and also by ward, by area of the city. Where do we have more heat pump and where do we have less? And also maybe different approach around how do we engage those people as well. And this is just a respectful request. I'll follow up with you next.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Jang. Councilor Bergman.
Thank you. I want to point us to lines 34 through 30, the 36 through 38, because they really speak to this question about affordability. What they say is that we're going to try to develop policies that are going to deliver benefits of the transition to low and middle income people in Vermont, in Burlington. And, we need to make a transition. We have a crisis that is burning this planet. And all of our kids and all of our grandkids, and even those of us who are going to be here, are going to wreak the havoc that you are starting to see the inkling of in India and Pakistan right now. So let's be really clear about the emergency. But, I have a heat pump, and I got weatherization efficiency through these incentive programs at my house in the old North End. It's an old house that's been renovated some, but is over 100 years old. And I would not have done it without the help of Efficiency Vermont and BED. And they made it possible to do. And they have really decreased the amount of natural gas that I put in. The idea that this is going to be that hybrid systems are there, it's not all or nothing. So I really appreciate the work that you all are doing, and I'm really looking forward, because this resolution just says for me to look forward to the product that you're going to give us so that we can then also take something out to the people. I totally agree that we need to have education, because if people in the new North End are concerned about people knocking on their door and, you know, doing something bad to them in 7 years, there's going to be bad stuff happening in 7 years, but it isn't going to be because the government here is going to be doing that. So I really look forward to the work they're doing. I hope that we pass this unanimously.
Great, thank you, Councilor Bergman. Councilor Hanson on the, and then we'll try if we can perhaps to go to a vote. Go ahead, Councilor Hanson.
Great, thanks. I just wanted to build off Councilor Bergman a bit and just respond to some of these concerns raised. You know, these initial policies that we're exploring, as we've said, are going to focus on new construction, major renovations, city buildings, large commercial. But I don't want to lose or shy away from the fact that ultimately we do need to get every building off of fossil fuels, not just in Burlington, but every community needs to do this in order to address this planetary emergency. And this concern about harming economically Burlingtonians, I think, is critical, and it's good that people are raising that concern. What I would encourage is that concern doesn't be used as an excuse to not move forward, but rather it be used as motivation to come together and find solutions so that we can make this transition in a way that does benefit the most vulnerable members of our community, and that, you know, either benefits or at least doesn't harm moderate income Burlingtonians as well. So I think that's the focus, and that's what we've laid out in the resolution. As Councilor Bergman said, that's what the climate justice ballot measure that passed alongside this charter measure, that's what voters said clearly in response to that ballot item. So that's the goal, and we need people to come together to figure out how we achieve that. But I definitely haven't heard anyone within the city team talking about trying to advance a policy that's going to hurt everyday Burlingtonians economically. I haven't heard anyone devising that, and that's not what we're going to get from BED in July and beyond. So I look forward to finding solutions that can benefit our community while addressing the climate crisis. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Councilor Hanson. If there's no other comments from councilors, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the amended resolution regarding decarbonizing all buildings in Burlington by 2030, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much to Councilors Hanson, Bergman, and Travers for your work, and to the administration for your collaboration on this resolution, and of course to Darren and Chris. It's always a pleasure to see both of you. Thanks so much for your work. We'll look forward to the report coming back to us in just a couple of months.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The last item on our deliberative agenda is a communication from Catherine Shad, CAO, regarding the expanded eligibility criteria to provide property tax relief to additional taxpayers using the existing ARPA allocation. This communication comes from the CAO, but it was also worked on collaboratively with a number of councilors. Councilor Travers, could you provide us with a motion, please?
Yes, thank you, President Paul. I'd move to approve an adjustment to the eligibility criteria of the current property tax relief lag program as approved by the City Council in Council Resolution 5.06 in the year 2021 to include an increase in assessed property value in FY22 from $500,000 to $550,000 to provide eligibility for properties who saw at least a 40% increase in assessment value, and to extend the program's end date until June 30th of 2022, with such criteria requirements becoming effective immediately upon adoption. And I'll ask for the floor back upon a second.
Thank you, Councilor Travers. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Councilor Bergman. Councilor Travers, you have the floor back.
Thank you, President Paul. I want to thank CAO Shad, Jason Gao, and other staff for their work on the property tax lag relief program. I also want to thank Councilors Carpenter, Barlow, and Hanson for their work with the previous council to develop the initial criteria for this program. From the outset, some important context. First, this is a one-year program funded with ARPA monies designed to address the unique impact of property owners missing out on income-based state tax rebates, with the state basing these needed rebates on FY21 assessed values rather than the FY22 values that resulted from the city's most recent reappraisal process. Two, and perhaps more importantly, the individuals who are eligible for this program, A, saw a tax increase as a result of the recent reassessment, B, have demonstrated financial need, and C, need to have faced additional financial hardship as a result of COVID. The previous council appropriated $1 million in ARPA funds to this program and established criteria where if every eligible household applied, each household could receive up to $2,000 in support. The first round of applications, which had a deadline of March 1st of this year, resulted in roughly $470,000 in awards, leaving $530,000 of the initially appropriated $1 million. So now the question is, who was left out of this first round? The proposal before the council tonight addresses the following. First, let's go back to the initial group who were eligible with one last reminder before the city's property tax deadline this June. Two, let's allow eligibility for those reassessments that went up by at least 40% rather than the higher 50%. By setting the figure at 40%, we effectively reach every eligible household that saw a net increase in their tax bill and bring nearly 300 more properties into the relief program. Three, let's bring another 70 or so properties into the program by raising the assessed value cap from $500,000 to $550,000, extending relief to households who were previously left out because of the location of their home and not necessarily because they have any less financial need. By lowering the percent increase in assessed value from 50 to 40%, as mentioned, it adds nearly 300 properties to the program. About 200 of these properties are in the new North End, with the remainder split evenly between the old North End and South End. If all of these eligible properties apply for relief, it will cost approximately $127,000. However, if application trends continue from that first round, I anticipate the actual cost will be closer to $60,000. Now, one question I asked is why have properties in the Old North End and South End not received as much relief as some other neighbors? And there are a number of factors as to why this is the case, but at least one of those reasons is that a number of properties in the Old North End and South End simply went up too much, placing them above the $500,000 threshold established by the previous council. There are a number of examples of this around the city. In my experience of the people left out of the initial criteria because of that assessment cap, many of them fit a similar mold. Long-term residents, often older residents, on fixed incomes with limited opportunities to move, especially given our current housing crisis. One of these neighbors was prepared to speak about this before the Board of Finance and very well may be still tuned into this meeting. This Ward 5 neighbor's property increased by 95% during the reassessment from $260,000 to $509,000. Their annual income is $12,000. They've lived in their house for more than 20 years. Their tax bill last year was $7,500 and they received rebate assistance of about $5,500. Their tax bill this year is nearly $11,000. But because of the property tax rebate lag, they are on the hook for nearly $5,000 in property taxes, about double what they paid last year. This situation will fix itself next year, but this year, nearly 50% of this neighbor's income is slated for taxes. The total cost of adding the 70 or so properties like this is a bit over $100,000. Again, if application trends continue, I believe the actual cost will be closer to $50,000. In sum, in total, nearly 400 households will be added by amending the criteria tonight. If every eligible household applies for relief, the total cost of these added households will be no more than $250,000 or so. But again, if application trends continue, I anticipate the actual cost of this will be closer to $120,000. Now, because these are ARPA monies, any monies that are left over will return to the citywide's ARPA pool. So if I'm doing my math correctly, which can be a little fuzzy at times, but I believe that this will leave around $400,000 of the originally slated $1 million in ARPA funds, which will return to the city pool. And I look forward to the council working with the mayor and the administration on how to best utilize those funds as well as the rest of the monies in the ARPA pool. So I thank my colleagues for their work on this matter and would be happy to answer any questions myself. I know CIO Shad is here as well, perhaps to bring some more clarity to the math. Thank you, Council. Thank you, President Paul.
Thank you, Councilor Travers. Before we go to any councilors who might have questions, CIO Shad, is there anything else you'd like to add? Okay, thank you so much. Are there any councilors? Councilor Jang, do you have your hand up from the last one or from this to this right here?
And I have a question for this one too.
Okay, so we'll go to you and then to Councilor Hightower. Go ahead.
Down first. Yes, Councilor Tavern, do I say it right? Travers. Yes, thank you so much. And I feel like in emails, you answered all my questions, mostly about the data collection. Thank you for doing so. And also, I think it would be important to remind everyone, I feel like the New North End, yes, we may have received more support from the first, deployment of this program, but I think also we should not be compared by any other neighborhood because of our size, right? We compose at least 1/4 of the Burlington City Council, the Burlington residents. We have maybe the biggest, residential neighborhood in the city, and it kind of makes sense for New North Enders to receive more support from this program in the past. But I wanted to also, make sure that because it does not sound morally, it does not sit well with me personally, because it seems the city of Burlington is using ARPA fund to support people who have, homes that are assessed at over $550,000, over $1 million, right? And to me, ARPA fund was given to municipalities in order to better support low income and to support the city in its infrastructures as well. And also, we all know that right now, I think every penny counts. And we also have, definitely issues around revenue loss. And we are at this budget season. And I was just wondering if there are other alternatives, such as tax abatement for those who have the inability to pay because of the reappraisal, to basically apply through the tax abatement instead of using these funds, to provide funds, basically. That's my first question to you and Catherine Chad as well.
Okay, so you're asking that question of Councilor Travers or CAO Shad?
Yes.
Okay, which one of you would like to answer that question?
I think Councilor Carpenter might be the best one.
Oh, okay. All right, Councilor Carpenter.
And I can kick it back to Councilor Barlow. I was chair of the tax abatement committee this last year, and we had a lot of discussion. When you abate taxes, you're using city tax dollars. So you're paying one way or the other way. So there's no true advantage to the city with the abatement process, because we've just got to take that out of our general fund to pay for the abatement. So, and it is unlikely to be eligible anyway, because abatement process is for a particular hardship, and maybe we could stretch the rules one way or the other to call this a particular hardship, but the city's still using city tax money to cover the cost. But I did want to also address, and I think Councilor Travers really said it well, a lot of these are unique situations. The applicant or the taxpayer can't get up and sell their house tomorrow. They may have to sell their house over time if they don't get enough aid from the state. But in this little 6 months period, they got to pay the bill. And this is to assist them until the state kicks in. So some of those examples that the counselor brought out, we hope and expect will be made up next year by the state income sensitized fund. So it's really a one-year problem.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Councilor Jang, did you have any other questions or comments?
Yeah, maybe then the city attorney can respond. Are there opportunities for us to basically the three elements in supporting somebody's tax abatement due to one, COVID-19 and also the reappraisal? Are there opportunities to do so? That's my question.
Thank you, Councilor Jang. So there is, we don't have a city attorney here with us. We have the parliamentarian here with us. I don't know if there's anyone here who can answer that question, or if we, yeah. Councilor Bergman.
As the former attorney for the Tax Abatement Committee and for the Tax Assessor's Office, I would say that would be opening a floodgate, which we would very strongly should strongly hesitate against. The uncollectability, the illegality, or the manifest injustice are the three bases by which, under our charter, we're allowed to abate. And, you know, maybe manifest injustice is in that realm, but there are so many things that could fall into the same situation. A change in a state program for a one-year period, which is fundamentally what this is. You would hemorrhage, we would hemorrhage our ability to collect taxes. I think that good lawyers can make good arguments on all sides, right? Whether we would deem that wise, I think is questionable. So, as a former attorney for this body, I'd say you could probably cobble together an argument. I would not, were I in that position, be advising that, and would be strongly advising against it.
Thank you, former Assistant City Attorney Bergman. Now Councilor Bergman, thank you. Councilor Jang, did you have any other questions?
No further questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilor Hightower to be followed by, Councilor Travers and then Councilor Barlow.
Yeah, I just had one question, which you got in an email, CEO Shad, but only a couple hours ago, so I don't know if you had a chance to answer it, and maybe you're not even the right person to ask, but I just wanted to make sure. I think the number that convinced me is that 40% increase is about what broke even from last year to this year in terms of tax burden. So is that a correct understanding that it was the 40% figure?
That's correct.
Yeah, great. So I think that for me is a good reason to have it at 40%, and then however high we can raise it beyond that, above $500,000, makes sense to me. So I'm supportive of this measure, and thanks for everybody who put the work into this.
Thank you, Councilor Hightower. Councilor Travers, to be followed by Councilor Barlow.
I'll yield to Councilor Barlow.
Thank you, President Paul. I just wanted to point out that even by raising this house value, we're still addressing property owners who have previously proven that they're income sensitized and receiving a property tax credit from the state. So, you know, we're not increasing the pool of people who might be privileged and don't need the assistance as people that have in previous years received this. So I just wanted to point that out, and I'll be supporting this.
Great, thank you, Councilor Barlow. Did you want to get back in the queue, Councilor Travers?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll just speak to one point briefly, and it was a point raised by Councilor Jang, and others spoke to it already. First of all, Councilor Bergman, very impressed that you recollected the three elements for the Tax Abatement Board there by memory. But just on the manifestly unjust piece, I think that at least many of the taxpayers who I've spoken to who were left out of the initial criteria actually would not argue that the tax itself is manifestly unjust. I think what you would hear from many folks is that what they see as unfair under the circumstances is a state property tax rebate system that has a lag. There's a reason we call it the property tax relief or lag relief program, and it's the fact that the state looks back to the previously assessed year as opposed to this year right now. I think that there's some bigger questions there, and we'll look forward to the work of the ad hoc committee that the previous council put together with respect to reviewing the reappraisal reassessment process, because that's a fix that we may need some state partners on, such that we don't run into this situation again. But I'm appreciative of the support from my colleagues here, and think that this will bring some very impactful relief to a number of additional taxpayers around the city.
Great, thank you, Councilor Travers. Are there any other councilors who wish to speak to this motion?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Councilor Jang.
Thank you. And thank you, Travers, for agreeing that, manifestly unjust could be a legal argument in order for those taxpayers. And I was just wondering, how about we start there? It seems we're only talking about 70 people, right? And was just wondering if you can basically encourage them to apply and just see where it's going to go. That's one. And two, I also want to know what the administration thinks about raising this cap to, for 550,000 to change the criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Jang. So I guess the first question is to you, Councilor Travers, I believe.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Councilor Jang, could you repeat the first question?
I was wondering if you are open to the idea of having those 70 people try to apply for tax abatement through manifestly unjust.
Well, I think that the point that I was referencing before is I don't know that for many of these taxpayers, the tax in and of itself is manifestly unjust. I think that the issue here is the unfairness in that there is a lag in the state system, and that folks have been put into circumstances that I don't know, I can't entirely speak to it, but I don't know that would fit within the manifestly unjust criteria. It's not the tax in and of itself that is illegal or manifestly unjust. It's the surrounding circumstances of the lag that have put a number of taxpayers in very difficult financial circumstances.
Thank you, Councilor Travers. We'll go to the mayor for the second question. Mayor.
Thank you, President Paul and Councilor Jang. Listen, I think this has been an important program for us to pursue given the lag issue, and I think Councilor Travers has really made a very detailed case as to why this further expansion will significantly help some additional folks in town who, under the current rules, they're really, this was a program intended to help folks like them, and the current rules, they will be shut out of it. So I think this has been detailed, important work. I do think it's important after this change, if we have some big decisions coming up as a council administration in the budget process, and certainly I think many are eager to see these ARPA funds deployed in ways that have maximum benefit for the community, and I think it will be important after this expansion to then return these funds to the broader ARPA pool and get it deployed in other ways once this expansion is complete and implemented.
Thank you, Mayor Weinberger. Councilor Jang, did you have any other questions? No? Okay, thank you so much. Seeing no other questions from councilors, we will go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve an adjustment to the eligibility criteria of the current property tax relief lag program as detailed by Councilor Travers in the recommended action, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you to all for your work on this. That will bring us to the end of our deliberative agenda. We have 4 remaining items. The first is item 8, committee reports. I know that Councilor Shannon has a committee report and don't know if there are others, but we'll give this to Councilor Shannon first and then go to Councilor Bergman, and we'll see if there are others. Councilor Shannon, can you hear us?
I can. Thank you very much, President Paul. Can you
go ahead. Oh, there you are.
Yeah. So I just wanted to let people know that we are having a PAC meeting on May 12th at 5 p.m. And we're going to be getting an update on Memorial Auditorium, also an update on the dog task force and on our public art guidelines. Also, we had a constituent contact the full council about flooding in Lakeview Cemetery. So we're going to hear from the Parks Department about that. And also we have a request for funding from an organization called Wood for Good, which can collect wood that has washed up on beaches and things like that the city needs to get rid of, and can use it for people that need, low-income folks that need that wood to heat their homes. So we're going to hear from them. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, that's actually quite a bit. Sounds like you're going to have a busy meeting. Councilor Bergman.
So the Charter Change Committee is going to be meeting on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, at 10 o'clock. We're still in an organizational phase, but we're going to be talking about non-citizen voting. And what is important to know is that we are really looking at public engagement with regard to that. And I envision us going into a variety of places in the community over the next number of months to engage folks about this. So we'll be looking for your assistance in getting folks to come about that. We'll have a proposal from the city attorney's office to start looking at, but we're not going to do anything absent some serious community engagement on this. We'll be talking about counselor compensation and getting research from the city attorney's office. Hopefully that will also include work from the Human Resources Department, and that too is something that we'll be looking to have real community engagement on this. I know that folks in Ward 1 and the East District were talking about this, at least on the Front Porch Forum that I had, and so we definitely know that there's engagement to have on that, but look forward to the implementation of the compensation for commissioners, and think that will help in this conversation as well. And then we'll have some other conversations regarding the committee's work. Thank you.
Great. Sounds like you'll also have a very busy meeting. Councilor Hanson, and I believe Councilor Jang, you have your hand up, and then to be followed by Councilor Hightower. Councilor Hanson, please.
Thanks. The Transportation, Energy, and Utilities Committee is meeting on May 24th at 5 p.m. I'm not sure the agenda yet, but I'll know by the next full city council meeting, which is the night before, so I can share that at that time. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Hanson. Councilor Jang.
Yes, thank you. The Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee will be meeting on Tuesday, May 17 from 5:30 to 7 in the conference room, Sharon Busher, City Hall. Agenda include updates from the administration about racism as public health emergency, couple of events happening in the city, such as Juneteenth on the 18th, and also Black Experience on the 17th, I believe, and also the hiring of the permanent racial equity inclusion director, the permanent REIB director. Updates from the administration. We also will be talking about the racial equity inclusion belonging racial equity roadmap, the strategic planning that was developed for the city of Burlington. The committee will be talking about the next steps after those were developed. And then we will be discussing our monthly meeting as well as welcoming our new councilor house. Thank you.
Councilor Hightower.
Thank you, President Paul. For CD&R, we've just had one startup meeting where we mostly covered when our next two meetings will be, and as well as the one-year action plan, which we all approved today. So our next meeting will be May 24th, where we plan on focusing almost exclusively on camping on municipal land, because there's a lot of interest around that. For future meetings, there's a few things on our accountability list and just some things that are pending. So I will be talking with Councilor Bergman about having a joint meeting or just joining one of their meetings to talk about non-citizen voting. And we also have landlord licensing, which is shared with ordinance. So Councilor Travers and I should get in touch around that. And then in June, we'll also talk about reviewing the tax policy, which right now we're waiting for the ad hoc committee to start meeting, as well as fiscal year 2022 tax information. So there's just some things that are upcoming in CD&R, but the next meeting will just be camping on municipal land, May 24th.
Great, thank you. Are there any other, Councilor Travers, please.
Just on behalf of the Ordinance Committee, there was a written report that's on board docs. The only update from there is that our next meeting will be on Thursday, May 26th at 5:30 p.m. Details to be posted on board docs. The only agenda item at this point in time is the short-term rental ordinance that's currently before the committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Travers. I actually was going to bring that up as well, that we are adding written communications to this item on committee reports. And we got our first one from Councilor Travers. It's it's only a couple of paragraphs, but it just gives you a pretty good idea of what's going on in the committee, which I found valuable, and I just wanted to thank Councilor Travers for getting the ball rolling on these reports. If there's no other committee reports, we'll go to City Councilor, General City Affairs. Is there any councilor wishing to report on General City Affairs? Wonderful. Councilor Barlow.
I just want to remind any of those viewing us on TV or on a recording that we have several open vacancies on boards and city commissions, and the applications for that are due no later than Friday, May 20th at 4:30. And I would encourage folks to give the list a look on the city website and participate in our city democracy.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Anyone else?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Jang.
No, this is something that I just noticed about the city lately, and it's about the Green Up Day in the city of Burlington and in the state in general. I remember it used to be a community event. I remember it used to have live, a lot of community event. But over the past couple of years, I have seen it kind of go down, and was just wondering what is being done or what committee need to look at it again in engaging, college students, youth, and to just try to make it as vibrant as possible. I think it would be great for the committee to look into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Jang. Anyone else on General City Affairs? Seeing none, next item is Council President updates. Councilor Barlow must have been reading my mind, because my first update was the fact that May 20th is the deadline for applications for commissions and boards. If you go onto the city website and go to the top of the screen, it says Commission and Boards. You go and click on there and you will find the application. And as Councilor Barlow said, it would be wonderful to have lots of applicants for our commissions and boards. We will be working on the selection committee for that in a couple of weeks. And then the only other item I just wanted to mention, Councilor Shannon had mentioned that the PAC meeting is getting an update on Memorial Auditorium. The council will also have an update on that on May 23rd. And then also to add to May 23rd, I did speak with Megan Tuttle today, who confirmed that Nancy Stetson is on her timeline to have the redistricting maps for initial review at that meeting. And then the only other thing is, on the top of the consent agenda, we always have a standing item called the accountability list. I don't know how many people have looked at that accountability list lately. There's about 40 items on that list, and they start at, I think, 2009. So I am working with Lori to go through that list and see if we can't cull that list. And for items that I am not sure whether they've been addressed, I will be contacting those department heads to see if we can't make that list a little bit more responsive to actual accountability. That's all I have. Our last item of the evening is comments from the mayor, Mayor Weinberger.
Great, thank you, President Paul. Two things from me. First of all, the council and the public should know that we are getting to an important stage of the annual budgeting process. This Wednesday and then Monday, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week, we will be having 5 p.m. budget presentations from all the departments, and this is especially, it's a great opportunity to really understand what is going on in each of the departments, to ask questions of department heads, and to get an understanding at the department level of how the challenging budget year is being approached. This is also, in the follow-up from this, we'll be looking to incorporate any feedback we get from counselors and the Board of Finance to these budget presentations into the final drafts of the budget that we will be moving towards submitting to the Board of Finance and the council in the first half of June. The other event that I wanted to bring attention to is coming up this weekend. It's really it's always a great part of the spring here in Burlington to see our various youth events coming back to life. They're even more poignant after some of the interruptions of the pandemic of the last couple of years. Was out at Callahan Park this past weekend, seeing both the return of the GBGSL soccer leagues, and the Little League has, of course, started up in the last couple weeks as well. This weekend, we have the return of Kids Day, and in fact, it's not even just Kids Day this year, it is Kids Weekend. There will be events Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's being spread around the city instead of just one big waterfront park event. There will actually be 3 events. Roosevelt Park on Friday, from 4 to 7 p.m. City Hall Park, 11 to 2 on Saturday. The fountain is back on, and that will be part of the events there. And then Szymanska Park will have events from 11 to 2 on Sunday. So hope to see you all out there. Hope to see many of Burlington's kids out there, and we'll see the council again in a couple weeks.
Thank you, Mayor. And the weather is going to be perfect, one hopes. If the advanced forecast is right, it will be a perfect weekend. On that note, and with no further business, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councilor House, seconded by Councilor Hightower. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We are adjourned at 9:30 p.m. Have a great evening.